I reached for my husband's hand. My body trembled, my hospital gown sticking to my skin with sweat. The sterile scent of disinfectant and the hum of medical machines filled the room as the nurse adjusted the four dripping into my vein. My vision blurred with tears. I needed him. Just the warmth of his hand. Just something to remind me I wasn't alone in losing the life we had both been waiting for. But when my fingers brushed his, he snatched his hand back as though I'd burned him. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting to the nurse and doctor standing at the end of the bed. And then he hissed words I'll never forget. "Don't let them think we're a couple." The sound of it sliced through me sharper than the pain twisting my abdomen. For a second, I thought I hadn't heard him right. But his face said it all. Stone cold, deliberate, as if I was just a stranger in a room full of strangers. I wanted to scream, to ask him how he could pretend not to know me when his own child, our child, was dying inside me. The nurse glanced at us, brows knitting together, but he turned away quickly, pulling out his phone as though he had more important business to handle than his wife bleeding on a hospital bed. My chest caved in. And right there, in that white, freezing room, I realized my husband wasn't just abandoning me. He was erasing me. And that moment, it was the beginning of something I never thought I'd be capable of. What he didn't know was that his words wouldn't destroy me, they would fuel me. But before I tell you how I became the woman who made him pay for everything, let me take you back to the beginning. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about love, power, secrets, and revenge. And you won't believe how it all unfolds. So if you're listening right now, don't forget to like, watch, and subscribe, because what I'm about to share with you will leave you holding your breath for more. My name is Emily Carter. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and life feels like it's already mapped out before you're even old enough to choose. I wasn't born into money or influence, but I was raised with faith, loyalty, and a heart that believed love could conquer anything. My parents worked regular jobs, dad in construction, mom as a school secretary, and I was their only daughter. For the longest time, all I wanted was the kind of love that makes you feel safe. The kind where you can close your eyes and know you'll never fall because someone's always there to catch you. That's why when I met Daniel, I thought I'd found exactly that. Daniel Parker wasn't just any man. He was the man everyone wanted to know. His family was powerful, wealthy, tied to politics and businesses that stretched across the state. He carried himself like he was untouchable, tall, sharp suits, a smile that could melt ice. But when he looked at me, really looked at me, I felt like I was the only one in the room. And for a girl like me, who'd never been seen beyond small-town walls, that was everything. We met at a charity gala. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I had gone with a friend who needed company. He walked up to me with a glass of champagne and said, "You don't belong in the background. A face like yours deserves center stage." I laughed then, shy and disbelieving. But Daniel had a way of making you think you were special, irreplaceable. We fell fast. Faster than I'd ever imagined I could. Within a year, we were married. His family didn't approve, of course. To them, I was the small-town nobody who had latched onto their golden son. But Daniel defended me, at least that's what I thought he was doing. He told me their opinions didn't matter, that he chose me because I was different, because I wasn't like the shallow women who only wanted his money. And I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. Our life together was a dream at first. We lived in a house so big it echoed when I walked through it. I quit my job because Daniel wanted me to focus on us. He said he would take care of everything, and I trusted him. I poured my heart into making that house a home, believing we were building something real, something lasting. And then I got pregnant. I can't even explain the joy I felt. I pictured tiny hands, baby laughter filling the halls, the two of us finally stepping into the life I'd always wanted. Daniel smiled when I told him, but behind his eyes, there was something else. Something I couldn't quite place. I brushed it off, told myself he was just nervous. After all, men weren't always good at showing emotions the way women were. But as the months passed, things started to change. He was gone more often, always at meetings or business trips. When he was home, he was distant, scrolling through his phone at dinner, barely listening when I spoke about nursery colors or baby names. I told myself it was just stress. He was carrying the weight of his family's empire on his shoulders, after all. Then came the day everything fell apart. I was 6 months along when I felt the pain, sharp, unbearable, tearing me from the inside. Daniel drove me to the hospital, but the whole way there, he was silent, his jaw clenched as he stared at the road. By the time we arrived, I was crying, clutching my stomach, begging him to stay with me. He nodded, but when we got inside, he changed. And that's when it happened. That moment when I reached for his hand, and he pulled away. The moment he looked at me, the mother of his unborn child, and told me not to let them think we were a couple. I thought losing my baby would be the worst pain of my life. But it wasn't. It was realizing that I'd lost my husband long before that hospital room. And the cruelest part? I didn't even know it. But here's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't end you. It remakes you. And that night, as I lay in that cold hospital bed, my body empty and my heart shattered, I made a silent promise. He thought he could erase me. He thought I would stay quiet, loyal, broken. But Daniel Parker had no idea who he had just created. And the first step of my revenge began sooner than anyone could imagine. That night in the hospital, I stared at the ceiling while my body felt like it was betraying me. Empty. Broken. My baby was gone. The nurse came in quietly, her voice soft, like she was trying not to make the cracks in me worse. She told me to rest. She even touched my arm gently, offering more comfort than the man who had vowed to love me until death. Daniel had stepped out, his excuse something about business calls. He didn't even stay to hear the doctor's final words, to hold me when they told me there was nothing they could do. And when he finally came back, his face was smooth, cold, his eyes avoiding mine. No tears. No grief. Just indifference. I turned my face to the wall, my hand pressing against my flat stomach where life had been just hours earlier. I couldn't cry anymore, so I just whispered in my head, "This is it. This is where my old self dies." When the nurse left us alone, Daniel sat on the chair near the window. He scrolled on his phone, his thumb flicking like nothing had happened. Like we weren't supposed to be parents. Like my pain was just another inconvenience. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice breaking. "Please just hold me." He didn't even look up. "Emily, we've talked about this. You know how things are. You can't expect me to play husband every time we're in public. People are watching. They'll judge." My chest tightened. Play husband? The words dug into me. So he wasn't my husband, not really? Just an actor in some script I didn't even know I was part of? That was the moment I decided. If he wanted to treat me like a stranger, then I'd become one. Not just to him, but to myself. Because the Emily who begged for scraps of affection, who believed in fairy tales, was gone. What was left was someone he didn't see coming. I didn't speak another word that night. Silence was my weapon, and he didn't even notice it being sharpened. When we got home, he didn't ask me how I felt. He didn't touch me. He walked into his study, shut the door, and locked it. That lock clicked in my head like a trigger. My grief twisted into something darker. Something that burned hotter than sadness. I spent days in bed, staring at the ceiling. But I wasn't weak, I was planning. Every moment of silence gave me clarity. I replayed every lie he had told me, every time he had come home late, every excuse. And slowly, the puzzle pieces started to come together. The missing meetings. The smirks when he read certain texts. The way his cologne sometimes lingered like he'd just come from somewhere he shouldn't. I realized he wasn't just ashamed of me. He was hiding me because there was someone else. And when the first bill came in the mail, an expensive necklace from Tiffany's, delivered to the wrong address with no card inside, I knew it wasn't for me. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I folded the receipt neatly, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it under my pillow. Proof. Evidence. The first piece of his undoing. You see, women like me were underestimated. He thought I was just a grieving wife who'd cry herself to sleep. But I was cataloging everything. Every lie. Every receipt. every late night. And when I was ready, I would hit him where it hurt the most: his reputation, his wealth, his power. But before that, I needed to know for sure. So one night, I followed him. I waited until he left the house around 9 p.m., telling me he had a late meeting. I slipped into my car and stayed 2 blocks behind him, my hands trembling on the wheel. The city lights blurred through my windshield as I tried to breathe evenly. He didn't go to an office. He didn't go to a boardroom. He pulled into the driveway of a luxury townhouse on the east side of the city. And when he rang the bell, she opened the door. A woman, younger than me, beautiful in that polished, magazine cover way. Her hair fell in waves, her dress clinging to her like it had been painted on. She smiled at him, leaned up, and kissed him, on the lips. Not a quick peck. A kiss of someone who belonged. My hands went cold on the steering wheel. My chest tightened, so hard I thought I might pass out. There it was. The truth in flesh and blood. And as I sat there in the dark, hidden behind my car's tinted windows, I whispered to myself, this isn't the end. This is the beginning. I drove home, my face dry. Not a single tear. Because tears were useless now. Tears wouldn't bring back my baby. Tears wouldn't make him love me again. But what would? Revenge. And in that moment, I knew exactly where to start. Because Daniel Parker had secrets. And secrets, when exposed, could destroy a man like him. The next morning, while he showered, I unlocked his phone. He was careless, thinking I'd never dare. But I knew his password. His mother's birthday. And what I found inside made my stomach twist. Not just messages from her, but others. Women. Photos. Promises. My hands shook as I screenshotted everything and emailed it to myself. File by file. Proof by proof. By the time he walked out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, smirking at himself in the mirror, I was already one step ahead. He thought he'd erased me in that hospital room. But I was rewriting the script. And my first move? Making sure that when Daniel Parker finally fell, it wouldn't just be a stumble. It would be a crash so loud the whole world would hear. That was the night I made contact with someone who hated him almost as much as I did. Someone who had the power to bring him down. But I didn't know then just how dangerous it would get, or how many lives would be caught in the crossfire. Because revenge, once started, doesn't always stop where you think it will. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was too loud, too sharp. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. The woman who opened that townhouse door. The one who smiled at my husband like she owned him. My body ached from grief, but my heart was hard now. And in that hardness, I found a new kind of strength. When morning came, Daniel left early for work. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't even look at me. Fine. Let him. Because I had other things to do. I opened my laptop, my hands trembling as I searched for a name that I had only heard in whispers at dinners and events. Mark Callahan. Mark was a journalist. Not just any journalist, he was the kind who took down giants. Corrupt politicians, corporate frauds, scandals hidden under layers of wealth. Daniel despised him. I remembered one night, Daniel ranted over whiskey about how Mark had ruined a friend's career with lies. Lies that, it turned out, were all true. If anyone could help me, it was him. I sent him an email from a new account, attaching screenshots of the first batch of evidence. I didn't sign it with my name. I simply wrote, I have more. Much more. And I'm ready to bring down Daniel Parker. If you're interested, meet me tomorrow night at Riverside Cafe. Midnight. Come alone. When I clicked send, I felt something shift inside me. Like I had just set a match to dry wood. The rest of the day, I played my role. I made dinner. I smiled faintly when Daniel came home late, his tie loose, the faintest trace of perfume clinging to him. He didn't notice me watching. He never noticed anymore. But I noticed everything. That night, while he slept, I lay awake beside him, staring at his profile in the dark. This man who once told me I was the love of his life. This man who let me bleed alone in a hospital bed. This man who erased me. And I whispered to myself, so quietly it was almost a prayer, you'll wish you never pulled your hand away. The next night, I went to Riverside Cafe. It was nearly empty, just a few late-night workers and students hunched over their laptops. I chose a corner booth, my hood pulled up, my pulse thundering in my ears. At exactly midnight, he walked in. Mark Callahan. He looked exactly like the photos I'd seen, rugged, tired eyes, the kind of man who carried too many secrets in his notebook. He scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over. "You're the one who emailed me?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I whispered, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of Daniel's texts, photos, receipts, just enough to prove I wasn't bluffing. Mark flipped through them, his brow furrowing. Then he looked up at me sharply. "And who are you?" I hesitated. I wasn't ready to say my name. Not yet. So I told him the only truth that mattered. "I'm the woman Daniel Parker thinks he can destroy." Mark studied me for a long time, then leaned back. "If what you're saying is true, then what you have here is only the tip of the iceberg. Men like Parker, they always hide the worst where they think no one will look." "I know," I said softly, "and I know where to look." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of power. Control. Like I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the one holding the knife. Mark nodded slowly. "All right, I'll bite. But you need to understand something. Once we start this, there's no turning back. Men like Daniel don't just lose gracefully. They ruin anyone in their way. You prepared for that." I swallowed hard. My hands clenched under the table. He already ruined me. He took my child. He took my life. I have nothing left to lose. Mark's eyes softened for a second, but just as quickly, the hardness returned. He closed the folder, slid it back to me. "Then we go all in. But if you're serious about revenge, you'll have to get your hands dirty. There's no halfway." I nodded. My voice was steady when I said, "Then show me how." That was the moment everything changed. Because revenge wasn't just an idea anymore, it was a plan. And I wasn't alone in it. When I walked back into my house at 2 a.m., Daniel was asleep on the couch, an empty glass of bourbon beside him. I paused at the doorway, watching him. Once, I would have curled up next to him, kissed his forehead, forgiven him before he even asked. But not anymore. Now I only saw a man who had no idea the walls were already closing in. And he would never see it coming because I wasn't going after him first. No. My first move was to strike at the woman in the townhouse. The one who kissed him at the door like he belonged to her. Because if you want to bring a man like Daniel Parker to his knees, you don't start with his empire. You start with his heart. And by the end of that week, she would regret ever letting him through her door. The very next day, I drove back to that townhouse. I didn't even know her name yet. All I had was the image of her standing in that doorway, kissing my husband like she had every right to him. But I didn't need her name to start. I parked a block away, pulled my hood low, and waited. Around noon, she stepped out, a leather bag on her arm, her hair shining in the sunlight like she was walking out of some fashion ad. She slid into her car, humming to herself, completely unaware that I was watching. I followed her. She went to a high-end boutique downtown, the kind with glass windows and mannequins that cost more than my old car. She laughed with the salesgirl, tried on dresses, bought two. Then she went to a spa. 2 hours later, she came out glowing, scrolling her phone with a smile that made my stomach twist. Because I knew whose messages were making her smile. Daniel's. When she finally stopped at a small cafe, I made my move. I parked, slipped inside, and chose a table directly behind her. She didn't even glance my way. Why would she? To her, I was invisible. From where I sat, I could hear the way she ordered her latte, the way she laughed softly into her phone. And then I saw it, the contact name flashing on her screen when it rang. D. She answered quickly, her voice lowering, almost intimate. "Hey, babe. Yeah, I miss you too. Tonight? Of course. Can't wait." My nails dug into my palms, so hard they almost drew blood. "Babe." She called my husband babe. That was it. I didn't just want to expose her. I wanted to make her feel what I felt in that hospital room. Helpless, shattered, discarded. I slipped my phone from my bag and snapped 2 photos, one of her laughing into her call, another of the screen where his name flashed. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. And then I did something that made my pulse race with both fear and thrill. I walked past her table on my way out, accidentally bumping into her chair so her phone slid slightly across the surface.
Oh.
Sorry about that, I said, my voice polite, innocent. She looked up, startled, then smiled. It's fine. Her smile. That same smile she gave Daniel when she kissed him. I smiled back, but mine had edges she couldn't see. Cute phone case, I added, pretending to admire it. It was a sleek leather one, expensive. She laughed lightly. Thanks. And then I walked out, my heart pounding. She had no idea that she had just met the woman who was going to dismantle her life. That night, Daniel came home late again. He smelled faintly of her perfume, and when he slipped into bed beside me, I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. But inside, I was awake, alive, calculating. The next morning, I sent the photos to Mark, along with the details of the cafe, the townhouse, everything I'd gathered. His reply was almost immediate. Good work. But are you ready for this to go public? Once we expose him, there's no undoing it. I stared at the screen for a long time. My chest ached at the thought of the whole world knowing.
The shame.
The whispers. The looks. But then I remembered Daniel pulling his hand away in that hospital bed. His words echoing. Don't let them think we're a couple. He had already erased me. Now it was my turn to erase him. Not yet, I typed back. I want her to feel it first. Then we go for him. Because revenge wasn't just about truth, it was about timing. So, I found her online. It didn't take long. Instagram, Facebook, even a Twitter account where she posted quotes about love and destiny. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She was 28, a marketing executive, and from the looks of it, she thought she had the world at her feet. Her posts were full of designer clothes, luxury vacations, champagne glasses raised in endless toasts. And in almost every picture, she tagged Daniel's sister, his friends, people in his circle. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just his mistress. She was his future. He wasn't ashamed of me, he was replacing me. That night, while Daniel showered, I created a new anonymous account and sent Vanessa a message with one of the photos I'd taken. Just one. The one of her at the cafe, laughing into the phone with D flashing on the screen. The message was short. Does his wife know? I imagine her face when she saw it. The fear creeping in. The way her stomach would twist the way mine did in that hospital. The next morning, she didn't post anything. Not a story, not a photo. Silence. And in that silence, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Because for the first time, I was the one in control. But I didn't stop there. No, I couldn't. 2 days later, I slipped an envelope into her office mailbox. Inside were copies of Daniel's messages to other women. Not just her. Because if she thought she was special, I wanted her to know she was just one of many. By the end of that week, Vanessa Cole was unraveling. Her posts became erratic. Private one day, public the next. Then gone completely.
And Daniel?
He came home angry, snapping at me over nothing, slamming doors.
I didn't ask why.
I didn't have to. Because I already knew I'd just lit the first fuse. And when Vanessa finally showed up at my house, eyes red, voice shaking, begging me to talk, I knew the game had just shifted to an entirely new level. What she told me that night would change everything I thought I knew about my husband. And it would push me down a path that even I wasn't sure I was ready to walk. When I opened the door and saw Vanessa standing there, I almost laughed. She wasn't the glamorous, polished woman I'd followed to the boutique and spa. No, this Vanessa looked broken. Her hair was a mess, her mascara smeared from crying, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Please, can I come in?" For a second, I wanted to slam the door in her face. To let her taste the rejection I had swallowed for months. But something in her eyes stopped me. Fear. The same fear I had felt in that hospital bed. So I stepped aside. She walked in like she didn't know where she was. Her heels clicked across the floor, but her confidence was gone. She clutched her bag like a shield, her whole body shaking. I shut the door behind us, and when she turned to me, her words tumbled out in a rush. "I didn't know, Emily. I swear I didn't know he was married. He told me he was divorced. He said you were sick, that you'd gone away. He told me." Her voice cracked. "He told me you were dead."
Dead.
The word struck me like a slap. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "He told you what?" My voice was low, dangerous, almost unrecognizable to my own ears. "That you were gone. That it was a tragedy, and he was still grieving. He said he couldn't talk about it in public because it was too painful." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. And I believed him. Oh God, I believed him. My stomach churned. The miscarriage. The cold silence. The way he pulled his hand away and said, "Don't let them think we're a couple." It all fit. He wasn't just ashamed of me. He was already replacing me. Erasing me. Killing me without burying my body. For a moment, rage blinded me. I wanted to scream, to break something, to tear down every photograph in the house. But I held it in. I had to. Because Vanessa wasn't just a victim. She was a weapon. "You think you were the only one?" I asked finally, my voice flat. "You weren't. He has others. Dozens, maybe more." Her eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God." I leaned closer. "Daniel Parker lies. That's what he does. And he's not going to stop unless someone stops him." She stared at me, trembling, and then whispered, "What do you want me to do?" And just like that, the woman who had kissed my husband at her doorstep became my ally. Over the next hour, Vanessa poured out everything she knew.
Names. Dates.
Places. Business associates Daniel used to cover his tracks. Even shady deals he bragged about after too many glasses of wine. She told me about offshore accounts, about money moving where it shouldn't, about favors exchanged with people who had power to ruin lives. By the time she finished, my hands were ice cold. Daniel wasn't just unfaithful. He was dangerous. And if half of what Vanessa said was true, he wasn't just betraying me. He was breaking the law. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked her. "Why not just walk away?" Her lips trembled. "Because I'm scared. He's not who I thought he was. And if he finds out I came here," she broke off, her shoulders shaking. "I think he'd hurt me." I studied her for a long moment. She wasn't lying. Daniel wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator. And predators didn't stop until someone made them. That night, after Vanessa left, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, typing furiously. I sent every detail she'd given me to Mark. Offshore accounts. Names of men Daniel was tied to. Every shred of information that could be traced. Mark's reply came quickly. "This is bigger than I thought. But if we go after him with this, it won't just be a scandal. It'll be a war. Are you ready for that?"
War.
The word should have scared me. But instead, it steadied me. Because Daniel Parker had already declared war the moment he told the world I was dead. When Daniel came home that night, his face was twisted with frustration. He poured himself a drink, slammed it on the counter, and muttered curses under his breath. He didn't even notice me watching from the doorway. "Bad day?" I asked, my voice smooth, almost sweet. He looked at me sharply, suspicion flickering in his eyes. For a split second, I thought he knew. But then he sighed, shaking his head. "Just business." I smiled faintly, hiding the storm in my chest. "Well, you'll handle it. You always do." And in that moment, he actually relaxed. He believed me. Still. But soon, the illusion would shatter. Because I had a plan now. Not just to expose him, but to destroy him completely. And the first step would be brutal. Because the next morning I got a call from Mark. His voice was tense, urgent. "Emily, listen to me. You need to be careful. I think Daniel already suspects something. One of my sources said he's asking questions. If he finds out you're the leak." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Because I already knew. If Daniel discovered what I was doing, he wouldn't just erase me. He'd silence me. For good. And that night, when I found a strange black car parked across the street from my house, engine running, windows tinted too dark. I realized the war had already begun. The black car idled across the street like a shadow that had grown wheels. I stood behind the curtain, my fingers trembling as I watched. My neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. No kids riding bikes, no dogs barking. Just that car, humming in the darkness. I knew it wasn't random. Daniel had put it there. He suspected. Maybe Vanessa had slipped. Maybe he'd noticed me moving differently, watching him instead of worshiping him. Or maybe he was just paranoid enough to plan eyes outside his own house. Whatever it was, I felt the cold truth settle deep in my chest. I wasn't safe anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at Daniel as he snored beside me. The man who had once whispered promises against my skin now looked like a stranger, an enemy in my own home. And as the hours dragged by, I realized that staying silent, staying careful, was no longer enough. I needed to strike harder.
Faster.
The next morning, I called Mark from a burner phone I'd bought in cash. "He's watching me," I whispered. "There's a car outside." Mark cursed under his breath. "Emily, you need to move. If he knows, you're in danger." "I'm not running," I said, surprising even myself with how steady I sounded. "Not until he loses everything." There was a pause. Then Mark's voice hardened. "Then we go nuclear. I have contacts, people in law enforcement who've been circling Daniel's family for years. If we give them what you and Vanessa collected, it'll light up like fireworks. But you have to be sure, Emily. Once this is out, your life won't be the same." I looked out the window again. The car was still there.
Silent.
Waiting. "My life isn't the same already," I said. Mark exhaled. "All right. Then we move." That day, I dug deeper. I slipped into Daniel's study while he was at a lunch meeting, using the key he thought I didn't know about. My heart thundered as I searched his desk, his drawers, his safe. And then I found it: files. Paper trails of offshore accounts, coded transfers, names of shell companies that led back to his father's empire. It wasn't just adultery. It was corruption, fraud, crimes that could end careers and put people in prison. I snapped photos of everything, my hands shaking, then carefully returned it all to its place. But when I turned to leave, I froze. Daniel was standing in the doorway. His eyes weren't angry, not yet. They were calm, calculating, like a predator who had just caught his prey. "What are you doing in here, Emily?" His voice was low, almost gentle. My throat went dry. I forced a smile. "I was just cleaning. You left your safe open." His gaze flicked to the safe, then back to me. He didn't move, didn't blink. For a moment, the silence stretched so thin, I thought it might snap. Then he smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was cold, sharp, the kind of smile that meant danger. You know, for someone who spends so much time at home, you sure have a habit of sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. I just wanted to help. He stepped closer, his cologne heavy in the air. "Help," he repeated, like it was a joke. "Emily, you've always been useful."
Quiet. Loyal.
"Don't ruin that now." I forced myself to hold his gaze, even as fear coiled in my stomach. "I'd never ruin anything, Daniel." He studied me for another long, suffocating second. Then he leaned down, kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong, and walked out. The moment the door shut, my knees buckled. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. That night, the black car was gone. But in its place, I found something even worse. A note slipped under my front door. "Stay in your place, Emily, or you'll end up just like the baby." My blood ran cold. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the paper. He wasn't just threatening me. He was mocking my loss. I crumpled the note, rage surging so hot it burned away my fear. He thought he could scare me into silence. He thought he could cage me like a pet, erase me like an inconvenient memory. But he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because grief may have broken me, but this threat had transformed me. And the next move I made would be so devastating, so final. that Daniel Parker would never recover. I picked up my phone, dialed Mark, and said the words that sealed both of our fates. Leak it. Leak everything. What I didn't know was that once the leak hit, it wouldn't just ruin Daniel. It would drag me into a storm so violent, blood would spill before it was over. And the first drop would fall sooner than I expected. The morning after I told Mark to leak everything, the world exploded. I woke to my phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications flooded in, news alerts, emails, missed calls. I opened the first headline, and my breath caught in my throat. Parker Dynasty exposed. Offshore accounts, fraud, and political scandal. Every outlet had it. Photos of the documents I'd stolen from Daniel's study were plastered on the front pages. Analysts were tearing apart numbers, names, connections. It wasn't just Daniel anymore. It was his father, his brothers, half the network that had built their fortune on dirty money. Mark's message came through, short and sharp. It's done. Don't go anywhere. I didn't plan to. My body buzzed with a mix of adrenaline and terror. This was it. The Parker empire was crumbling. Daniel was finished. I thought I'd feel relief, but instead, dread pooled in my stomach. Because if I knew Daniel, he wouldn't go down quietly. By noon, the proof was there. He stormed into the house like a hurricane, his eyes bloodshot, his tie torn loose around his neck. His phone was clutched in his fist, the screen still glowing with unanswered calls. You, he hissed, pointing at me. You did this. I stood in the middle of the living room, refusing to flinch. You ruined yourself, Daniel. I just made sure the world saw it. His laugh was hollow, dangerous. Do you think this ends me? My family doesn't break. We destroy the people who cross us. You think you're safe? You think that cop of yours can protect you? The mention of Mark hit like ice water. How did he know? Daniel stepped closer, his voice low, venomous. You should have stayed quiet. Now you've signed your own death warrant. Before I could respond, he lunged. His hand closed around my throat, slamming me against the wall. My vision blurred as I clawed at his grip. His face was inches from mine, twisted with fury. You cost me everything, he growled. So, I'm going to take everything from you. A deafening crash shattered the moment. The front door burst open. Mark and 2 officers stormed in, guns drawn. Let her go, Mark shouted. Daniel froze, then slowly released me, his hands raised but his smirk intact. Well, the boyfriend arrives. What a cliché. Mark's jaw clenched, but he didn't take the bait. The officers moved in, cuffing Daniel while he spat curses and threats. This isn't over. You'll regret this, Emily. Both of you will regret this. They dragged him out, but even as the door slammed shut, his words lingered in the air like smoke. I sank onto the couch, shaking so badly I could barely breathe. Mark knelt beside me, his hand steady on mine. It's over, he said softly. But I knew he was wrong. Because the headlines may have destroyed Daniel's career, but men like him didn't go quietly into ruin. They clawed, they bit, they burned everything around them just to watch the world fall. And I saw it in his eyes as he was taken away. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his last, desperate play. That night I packed a bag, but it wasn't for running. It was for war. Mark tried to convince me otherwise. You've already won, Emily. He's facing charges that will bury him. I shook my head. You don't understand. Daniel doesn't stop until someone makes him. He threatened my life, Mark. He mocked our baby. If I leave him breathing, he'll come for me again. And next time he won't miss. Mark's silence was heavy, his eyes searching mine. Finally, he said, Then what are you planning? I zipped the bag shut and met his gaze. I'm going to finish this. Once and for all. Because Daniel had taken too much from me. My peace, my child, my future. I'd watched him destroy lives and smile while doing it. I just didn't realize yet that in destroying him, I would risk destroying myself too. The night was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your skin and dares you to move. My bag was packed, my plan set. Every detail had been gnawing at me for days, and now, with Daniel behind bars on temporary charges and his empire collapsing, I knew it was my only chance. He was scheduled for transfer in the morning to a federal facility. Mark thought that meant safety, but I knew better. Daniel had money stashed, guards bought, and loyalty that ran deeper than iron. If I didn't finish this now, I would spend the rest of my life waiting for his shadow at my door. I slipped out into the night, my heart steady. For once, I wasn't afraid. I was resolved. The county jail loomed like a beast of concrete and steel. I wasn't foolish enough to try to storm it, but I didn't need to. Daniel's weakness was his arrogance. He always found a way to pull strings, even caged. And, true enough, just after midnight, he managed what I expected. A van pulled into the alley behind the jail. Not an official transport. His people were already moving him. I waited, crouched in the dark, until I saw him step out, uncuffed, flanked by two men who looked more like mercenaries than friends. He was grinning, his expensive coat draped over his shoulders as though the world still belonged to him. That was when I stepped out of the shadows. "Going somewhere, Daniel?" My voice carried sharp in the night air. He froze. Then, slowly, that cruel smirk returned. "Emily, I wondered when you'd grow the spine to face me directly." The men reached for their weapons, but Daniel lifted a hand.
No.
"She wants me. Let her talk." I could see it in his eyes. He thought this was another game, another chance to manipulate me. But he didn't know that I wasn't the same woman who once covered his sins and swallowed his lies. "I'm not here to talk," I said, pulling the small pistol from my bag. Mark had begged me not to carry it, but deep down, I knew it was the only language Daniel understood. For the first time, his smirk faltered. "You won't," he said, though his tone was less certain than before. "You don't have it in you." I stepped closer, the gun steady in my hands. My voice didn't shake. "You killed our baby when you shoved me.
You spread lies about me.
You dragged me through hell and moved her into my house, as if I was already dead. Tell me, Daniel, what exactly do I owe you now?" His jaw tightened, and for a brief second, I saw the mask crack. The charm slipped, the bravado bled out. Underneath, he was just a desperate man staring at his end. "Emily, think about what you're doing," he tried. "If you shoot me, you'll lose everything.
Prison. Shame.
You'll be exactly what I told people you were, crazy, unhinged, broken." My finger curled against the trigger. Tears blurred my vision, but my voice was clear. "The difference is, I'd rather be broken than chained to you." And then, before doubt could creep in, I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening in the alley. Daniel staggered back, shock flashing across his face as he collapsed against the van, his expensive coat blooming with red. His men panicked, but I didn't care. I kept my gaze locked on him, watching the last of his arrogance drain away. "You don't owe me any more," I whispered. The aftermath was chaos, sirens, shouting, Mark's horrified face when he arrived moments later. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I dropped the gun and lifted my hands. They arrested me, of course. They called me reckless, dangerous. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Because no matter what cage awaited me, I knew Daniel's shadow could never touch me again. Months later, I stood in a cold courtroom, the weight of the world pressing on me. Mark sat in the back, his eyes locked on mine, silently urging me to stay strong. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber. Charges dismissed. Justifiable self-defense. I collapsed into tears. Not because I was free, but because I finally allowed myself to mourn everything Daniel had taken from me. My child, my years, my peace. But he couldn't take my future. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt the sun warm my face. Mark reached for my hand, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let someone hold it. Daniel was gone. His empire lay in ruins. His name meant nothing but shame. And me? I wasn't his victim anymore. I was Emily, the woman who survived him, who ended him, who rose from the ashes of his lies. And as I looked ahead, I knew one thing with certainty. This was not the end of me. This was the beginning.